She screams, but no one comes. Not because they don't hear her. They do. Every member of the group, crouched low in the shadow of the acacia canopy, hears her voice tear through the pre-dawn dark like a wound in the world. They don't come because they can't. Because out here, in the trembling hours before sunrise, sound is an invitation. And something is always listening. This is East Africa, 4.5 million years ago. And a young female, barely past adolescence by our reckoning, is giving birth alone in the undergrowth, biting down on her own arm to muffle what her body cannot contain. She has no midwife, no medicine, no concept of what is happening inside her, only that it is happening and that it must end. What she is experiencing tonight will either make her an ancestor or a casualty. And here is the thing that will stop you cold. The odds are not in her favour. Let's place you in this world precisely. We are 4.5 million years ago. The species most likely living at this moment is Ardipithecus ramidus, or something very close to it. A creature that paleoanthropologists have called one of the most important discoveries in the history of human origins. Ardi, as she has come to be known, the most complete skeleton of this species ever found, unearthed in Ethiopia's Middle Awash region, tells us something astonishing. She walked upright. Not perfectly, not like you, but she stood on 2 feet when she needed to, and climbed trees when survival demanded it. She was not a chimpanzee. She was not human. She was something in between, something the universe had never made before. Her brain was roughly the size of a modern chimpanzee's, around 300 cubic centimeters. Her teeth suggest an omnivorous diet. Her pelvis, and this is critical for what we're about to explore, was already beginning its long, agonizing negotiation between walking upright and giving birth safely. That negotiation, scientists now believe, would define the next 4 million years of human suffering and survival. The environment she inhabited was no savanna wasteland. Evidence from the Middle Awash deposits suggests a mosaic ecosystem. Woodland, grassy clearings, riverside forest. Temperatures average around 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. Predators everywhere. Ancient big cats, giant hyenas, crocodiles along every water source. Life expectancy? Almost certainly under 30 years. If you made it to 25, you were a survivor. If you gave birth more than once, you were, in the truest sense of the word, extraordinary. Here is the counterintuitive fact that should reframe everything that follows. The very thing that makes humans the dominant species on this planet, our large, complex brains, is also the thing that made birth catastrophically dangerous for millions of years. And it started right here, right now, with her. To understand what childbirth meant for these creatures, we first have to understand what their daily lives looked like. Because birth did not happen in isolation. It happened inside an existence that was already, moment by moment, a negotiation with death. Imagine a group of perhaps 15 to 20 individuals. They move together, not as a family in the way we understand it, but as a survival unit. There is a hierarchy. There is communication, not language, not yet, but gestures, vocalizations, touch. Mothers keep infants pressed against their bodies almost constantly. The infants cannot walk for over a year. They cannot cling with the same grip strength as a chimpanzee infant. They are, in evolutionary terms, expensive, heavy, dependent. Food is the center of every waking hour. Evidence from Ardipithecus tooth enamel suggests a diet of fruits, leaves, small animals, insects, and soft underground plant material. There is no cooking. No tools yet that we can confirm at this stage. Food is found, contested, and consumed raw, quickly, often in the trees where larger predators cannot follow. Sleep happens in the canopy, or at least in sheltered, elevated positions. The ground at night is a killing floor. And woven through all of this, through the foraging, the social bonds, the constant low-level terror of predation, are the pregnant females. Fossil evidence does not preserve the soft architecture of pregnancy, but comparative anatomy tells us something profound. A female Ardipithecus carrying a near-term infant would have been moving through this landscape with a dramatically shifted centre of gravity, diminished agility, and heightened vulnerability. The group would have known. Animals always know. And the social behaviour of modern great apes suggests she would have been watched over. Not with medical intention, but with the instinctual protectiveness that social mammals extend to vulnerable members. There is a fossil from roughly this period, not Ardipithecus specifically, but recovered from overlapping East African deposits, of an infant skeleton showing pathological bone growth consistent with malnutrition in the final trimester. A mother who could not eat enough. A baby that barely survived its earliest days. They didn't write about it. They couldn't. But the bones remember. Here is where the story gets brutal. Here is where we have to confront what science has quietly confirmed, and what most history books skip over entirely. Human birth is, by any biological standard, extraordinarily dangerous. Not somewhat dangerous. Not risky in the way most things are risky. Dangerous in a way that has no real equivalent among our closest primate relatives. A chimpanzee infant, when it exits the birth canal, faces forward. The mother can reach down, guide the baby, and pull it free if needed. The infant's head, relative to the mother's birth canal, fits with room to spare. Labour in chimpanzees is typically fast, often under 2 hours. The mother is usually alone. She manages. Our ancestors could not. The moment hominids began walking upright, the pelvis began to change shape. To enable bipedal locomotion, the pelvis had to rotate, narrow, and restructure. The birth canal, the passage through which infants exit, became tighter, shorter, oval rather than round. And at the same time, the thing passing through that canal, the infant's head, was beginning a slow, multi-million-year expansion. This is what evolutionary biologists call the obstetric dilemma. The brutal negotiation between a pelvis optimized for walking and the skull optimized for intelligence. At 4.5 million years ago, the brain was not yet dramatically enlarged. Ardipithecus infants did not have the enormous skulls that would make birth almost suicidal for Homo sapiens 500,000 years ago. But the restructuring had begun. The geometry was already shifting. And what this meant in practice, in the mud and the blood and the darkness, was this. Labour was longer than it had ever been for any primate ancestor. The infant's head, even at this early stage, had to rotate during delivery, a manoeuvre no other great ape requires. The mother could not easily reach down to guide the baby. It emerged facing away from her, making self-assisted delivery far more difficult. A female Ardipithecus in active labour was vulnerable for hours. Hours in which she could not run. Hours in which she was loud, disoriented, and in pain. Hours in which every predator within earshot had an invitation. We know, from the obstetric records of historical forager societies, our closest living proxy for this reality, that without assistance, a significant percentage of births ended in the death of the mother, the infant, or both. In some documented pre-industrial populations, maternal mortality in childbirth ran as high as 1 in 8 deliveries. 1 in 8. Now remove the medicine. Remove experienced midwives. Remove clean water, rest, and nutrition. Remove everything except instinct, endurance, and the thin hope that the group stays close enough to help. That is where she is tonight, in the dark, alone. But here is what the fossil record suggests. Here is the thing that changes everything. She was almost certainly not supposed to be alone. We've been talking about what birth costs these creatures, about what the anatomy demanded, about the darkness and the danger and the impossible odds. But here is the question that will take us to the most surprising discovery of this entire story. If birth was this dangerous, if the odds were this bad, why did it work? Why did our lineage survive at all? The answer lies not in biology, not in brute strength or speed or the size of any tooth or claw. The answer lies in something far more radical. Something that 4.5 million years ago was just beginning to emerge in a small, upright walking primate in East Africa. Stay with us. Before we go further, if you've made it this far, you already know this channel is not like other history channels. We don't just tell you what happened. We take you there. If that matters to you, if you want to keep traveling back in time, subscribe to Hominid Echoes right now. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We want to know where our ancestors' descendants are sitting tonight. Now. The answer. The survival of our lineage through millions of years of dangerous, complicated birth was not an accident of anatomy. It was the product of something unprecedented in the animal kingdom: cooperative birth care. Researchers studying modern great apes have observed something telling. Chimpanzee females, when birthing, are almost always alone. Bonobos, our other closest living relative, show something different. Females sometimes remain nearby during another female's labour. They observe. In rare cases, they help. It is a hint. A ghost of something older. For early hominids, the evidence, drawn from comparative primate behaviour, archaeological patterns in later periods, and the social complexity implied by Ardipithecus group living, suggests that birth was beginning to become a communal event. Not by design, not by conscious choice, but because the females who received assistance during labour survived at higher rates. And the groups that developed the instincts to assist, to stay close, to watch, to help where they could, those groups persisted. This is the origin of the midwife. Not a profession, not a role with a name or a title. Just another female, older, experienced, who had survived her own deliveries and whose presence, whose body warmth, whose steady hands reduced the chaos of those terrible hours. The anthropologist Wenda Trevarthen has argued, compellingly and with significant supporting evidence, that the rotation of the infant's head during human birth, which makes self-delivery nearly impossible, was itself a selective pressure for cooperative behaviour. In other words, the very difficulty of human birth may have been an evolutionary catalyst for social bonding, trust, and the earliest forms of caregiving. Birth made us kind. Because if it didn't, it would have killed us. At 4.5 million years ago, this shift is embryonic. A tendency, not yet a cultural practice. But it is there. In the way a group member crouches near the labouring female. In the way the others form a loose, watchful perimeter. In the infant cry that, for the first time, pulls multiple adults toward it rather than away. The fossil record from this precise moment cannot show us this directly. Behaviour does not fossilise. But when the first stone tools appear, 2.6 million years ago, they appear in social contexts. Sites with evidence of group activity, shared food, coordinated effort. The social infrastructure for cooperative birth had to precede that. It had to be built, quietly and invisibly, in the long dark before the first tools. She did not know she was building civilization. She was just trying to keep her infant alive until morning. 4.5 million years ago, a nameless female, a nameless infant, and somewhere, across an unimaginable gulf of time, a line leads directly to you. You carry this story in your body, literally. If you have given birth or watched someone give birth, you have witnessed the direct, unbroken consequence of the obstetric dilemma that began at precisely this moment in evolutionary history. The pain, the duration, the biological need for a second person in the room. These are not modern medical constructs. They are ancient requirements. The reason human infants are born so helpless, so neurologically incomplete compared to the newborns of almost every other mammal, is that the skull must exit the birth canal before it has finished growing. A human baby at birth has a brain only 25% of its adult size. A chimpanzee newborn's brain is already 45% of adult size. We are born early, by necessity, because if we waited until our brains were more developed, our heads would never fit. This is why human infants cannot walk, cannot coordinate their limbs, and cannot regulate their own temperature for months. They are, in the bluntest biological terms, premature by any other mammal's standard. And this is why, from the very moment this pattern began to emerge, 4 million years ago and more, human mothers needed help. Not as a social nicety, as a survival requirement. The anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy calls this cooperative breeding, the idea that human infants evolved specifically to be raised by multiple caregivers, not just the mother. That the infant smiles, the infant makes eye contact, the infant coos. These are not random developments. They are recruitment tools. They are the infant's evolutionary strategy for making every adult in the vicinity want to protect it. Think about the last time you saw a newborn and felt something involuntary move in your chest. That was 4.5 million years of evolution working exactly as designed. The fear new mothers feel in the dark, the hypervigilance, the inability to sleep deeply when the baby sleeps. That is Ardipithecus listening for the predator. The instinct to press your infant against your body rather than set it down. That is the long canopy night still alive in your nervous system. The village it takes to raise a child was not invented by a proverb. It was invented by necessity, in the dark, by creatures who could not yet speak its name. She survived. We can't know her name. We can't know if she survived the following year, the following season, the following week. The fossil record from 4.5 million years ago is fragmentary and largely silent on individual lives. But we know this. Something survived. A line held. Generation after generation after generation. In the dark, in the pain, in the trembling hours before dawn. Someone endured it. And then did it again. The path from her to you passes through approximately 200,000 generations. 200,000 women who found some way to do what she did. 200,000 newborns who held on long enough to become someone, who held on long enough to become someone, who eventually, impossibly, looked up at the stars and wondered where they came from. The obstetric dilemma is not solved, not fully, not even now. Birth remains one of the most dangerous events in a human's life in much of the world. The World Health Organization estimates that globally, a woman dies in childbirth approximately every 2 minutes. The crisis is not ancient history, it is present history. The stakes have changed, but the body has not changed as much as we might believe. What has changed, what Ardipithecus began building in those East African woodlands millions of years ago, is us. Our capacity to stay, to help, to form the circle. Every midwife, every partner in a delivery room, every older woman who has ever put her hand on a labouring woman's back and said, without words, "I am here. You are not alone." They are all echoes of a behaviour that is older than language, older than fire, older than the first stone shaped by the first hand. It began in the dark. It was built from necessity. And it became, somehow, the first recognisable thing we might call love. She didn't know what she was starting. She only knew the dawn was coming. And she held on. If this video moved you, if it made you feel the weight of what your ancestors survived to put you here, then subscribe to Hominid Echoes. Every week, we travel further back into the story that made you. Early human history, ancient life, the mysteries buried in the bones. The story isn't over. It never was.